editing for 12 hours straight, that's more like me getting into the flow.
Yeah.
And when I'm in the flow, I'm like, okay, I don't want to do anything else. I don't want to eat. I don't want to do anything. I don't want to sleep. I forget about eating. Like it's happened sometimes when I'm editing, like especially the photo battles, they take so long and so much effort that like sometimes I'll go like 3 days of like editing, maybe like 9 to 10 hours just consecutively. And I'm like burnt out by the end of it, but it's always worth it because I'm like, yeah, good product. Nice.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the burnout because that is something that I've learned. Like I'm a few years older. How old are you?
I'm 22.
Okay, so I'm 29 now. So I'm a few years older. I've learnt this. At the 22, I probably didn't realize it, but now at 29, like that shit will come back to haunt you, particularly later on in life where things start to get a little bit harder because you have more responsibilities or whatever. But yeah, burnout for me is not, it's not good.
No.
You got to learn at some point in the next few years that, and you had that video about talking about overwhelm, and there was a few questions about that. Learning to deal with that pressure and taking time out, which I can imagine in your mind, you're probably the type where you really struggle with it and you're always sort of in your head, right? Thinking about work or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
How have you learnt to sort of, what have you done so far to deal with it?
Well, the reason why I get burnt out, if I ever do get burnt out, is if I'm being a perfectionist because I'm being too hard on myself and I'm thinking about like, okay, what can I do to make this the best? But the thing is, I never got into animation or making videos or taking photos to make the best thing for other people. I never really did it for other people. I did it because I wanted to do it and I just wanted to see I was curious. I'm curious to see what I can make.
Yeah.
And when I have the mindset of focusing on the process rather than the actual outcome, rather than any outcome, then that's when I do, one, my best work, but two, I have the most fun with it because I'm not thinking, oh, like, what if this happens? What if this happens? Because if you're thinking about outcomes, you're thinking about the future or the past.
Yeah. And that's the issue with anxiety and burnout is it's a constant focus on the future.
Yes.
That's the biggest thing.
100%.
And you got to bring yourself, bring yourself back to reality about not focusing about the potentials, but just doing something.
Yeah.
It's very hard. Very hard.
I'm reading it. Well, I've actually pretty much just finished reading this book. It's called The 5 Thieves of Happiness. And the first thief is control. And when you're a perfectionist, you're a control freak because you want everything to be perfect. You're looking through this lens to the world, seeing like, okay, look for perfect rather than being like, okay, that's good enough kind of thing. And so like with the whole outcomes and stuff, when you're focusing on that, like obviously that brings anxiety and that makes you, it actually makes you unhappy because it takes you away from the process, which like life is not a destination. As cliche as this sounds, life is not about the destination. It's about the journey. It's about getting into the flow and just having fun with it. Not about being like amazing or successful or whatever, because it's like, when you become successful, when you get, say, 1 million subscribers or whatever, you'll be like, oh yeah, cool. But then it like just dies away so quickly.
Yeah, it's what do they call that? It's sort of like lifestyle creep.
Yeah.
Everything's relative at that moment. But when you start thinking about future situations, like it's like it applies like a heavier weight to it, if that makes sense. Like if you're at like 100,000 subs and you're thinking, oh, 1 million, like it starts to apply a lot of pressure on you. But when you get there, you're probably just like,
exactly.
It's all relative. Like, oh, now I'm thinking about 10 million.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That's the hardest thing to deal with.
Yeah.
And you're right. You've got to focus on the process and just enjoying what you're doing. As cliche as that sounds, once you start to do that, it becomes just a lot more enjoyable.